Spot fans rejoice, for our time has finally come. The limelight previously reserved for alleged A-list Spider-Man villains has shifted to the truly unique and dastardly ones. Anybody's grandmother is gonna know who Green Goblin or the Lizard is. I mean, those are household names. But only the most battle-hardened Spider Boys and girls know Johnathan Ohnn, aka the Spot. Played by the wonderful Jason Schwartzman in Across the Spider-Verse, the Spot is a character who is ridiculously awesome. Personally, I love characters like the Spot who writers don't take too seriously but have really interesting powers and cool stories if you're willing to look and give them a chance. Another example of a similar character is Polka Dot Man, so check out our video on their complete history on the screen now, or I don't know, just keep watching this video. Today's video is on the Marvel Comics history of the Spot. We're not going to cover every single story he's been in, but we will cover the most important ones, so strap in, Spotsters, our time has come. The character that would go on to become the Spot, Johnathan Ohnn, made his comic book debut in Peter Parker The Spectacular Spider-Man 94, and his first full debut as the Spot in issue number 98, and was created by Al Milgrom and Herb Trimpe. Johnathan Ohnn was first shown in Peter Parker's The Spectacular Spider-Man 94, working for the Kingpin as an unnamed scientist in his lab, as Kingpin had hired him and others to reproduce radiation created by the hero Cloak. They used this radiation to reanimate the villain Silvermane, who went out into New York City as a mindless doofus, causing problems for Cloak, Dagger, and the Web Crawler for a couple issues. Fast forward to issue 97 and we get our first look at Johnathan Ohnn. A former MIT scientist working for the Kingpin, Kingpin had recently lost a string of embarrassing confrontations with Black Cat, Spider-Man, Cloak, and Dagger. Johnathan discusses the possibility of using data he had captured on Cloak during their battle to possibly help recreate super soldiers for the Kingpin who act as enforcers. Late at night in the lab, Ohnn creates a giant black hole, and after passing through it finds himself in a strange dimension filled with half light and half dark energy. He would later dub this the Spotted Dimension. After finding his way out of the same hole he traveled through to enter the dimension, Ohnn emerges covered in head-to-toe black spots that acted as holes within space-time that he could travel through. Determining his experiment was a success, he figures that he needs to at least test his powers properly before showing Kingpin that he had done what he had asked. In the next issue, Spider-Man and the Black Cat end up needing to meet up with Wilson Fisk. There, they're in the process of breaking into his facility when they're intercepted by Ohnn, now calling himself the Spot. Spider-Man takes one look at the Spot and falls onto the ground laughing at him, but as we all know, being the most powerful Spider-Man villain, the Spot is not one to be laughed at. The Spot creates dozens of portals around Spider-Man and is able to punch and kick him savagely through the portals before Spider-Man's spider sense can stop the onslaught. Ultimately, the Spot kills Spider-Man and becomes the strongest villain in Marvel Comics history. Hold on, these notes aren't right. Apparently it says here that the Spot doesn't hit hard enough to actually hurt Spider-Man, so attempts instead to beat him by attrition. I.e., he just keeps hitting him until he's hurt or annoyed. Spider-Man ends up diving into a portal after him and headfirst into a brick wall, effectively losing the battle. Spot leaves Spider-Man and warns him not to threaten Kingpin again. The Spot manages to keep his identity secret for a bit, even after Kingpin demands to know what progress he's made in his experiments. The Spot, wanting to test his powers again, engages in a second battle with Spider-Man, again on the roof of Kingpin's facility, except this time, Spider-Man forces the Spot to get a little closer to him than the Spot was prepared for. By accidentally forcing the Spot to use too many portals, Spider-Man pinpoints his location and grabs him, causing the Spot to immediately surrender, which some might find cowardly, but it's actually a 4D chess move. Why get beat up by Spider-Man when you don't need to? The Spot shows up here and there over the next few decades and establishes a track record that many would consider to be lackluster. Some might even say that he was a D-list villain, but we all know that true greatness takes time to cultivate. He appears in the Spectacular Spider-Man 245 and 246, where he forms a team-up with other D-list villains to get revenge on Spider-Man, failing in the process and effectively becoming known somewhat as the Legion of Losers. In an effort to further lull his prey into a sense of false confidence, the Spot was willing to even die. In fact, he died, supposedly, twice in the comics. But wait, because it's entirely possible that the Spot is immortal. Yes, you heard that right. It's possible that the Spot cannot be killed, or at least if he can, we don't know how to do it. You see, the Spot has died multiple times, but always comes back with virtually no explanation of how he does it. His first death occurred after springing Tombstone from jail in 2002's Spider-Man Tangled Web number 17. Tombstone, who was stuck in jail and suffering with a bad heart, is transported out of jail by Ohnn. Tombstone helps Spot get parole, and in return, the Spot springs him from jail while literally on the operating table. In return, Tombstone kind of breaks his neck, seemingly killing him. Yet, just a few months later, he reappears as if it had never happened. The second time the Spot was killed was by a brainwashed Wolverine in an awful story that saw Spot working for the Hand, and it's bad, and I don't even want to talk about it. Regardless, the Spot just shows up again later in Spider-Man stories with absolutely no explanation of where he'd been after dying to Wolverine. More on this potential immortality in a moment. But if there's anything comic book fans love, it's a redemption story. Oftentimes, it only takes one writer who believes in a character to see their true potential. After again being believed to be dead, writer Fred Valenti penned a story called Marked that saw both Spider-Man and the Spot in a showdown with a Russian mobster, Dmitry Ivankov. The Spot breaks into a Russian mafia compound and begins executing the guards savagely. Not known as a killer, Spider-Man is tipped off to the assault and decides to protect Dmitry's life in exchange for confessions to his various crimes. The Spot assaults Spider-Man and Dmitry, and they barely escape. Before the Spot can kill Ivankov, Spider-Man stakes his life on the claim that he will stop at nothing to save Ivankov's life. Spot ends up giving up and leaves Spider-Man with an illegible note explaining what had happened to him and where he was recently. We learn that after an altercation with MODOK and the Mandarin, Ohnn ended up trapped within his own spotted dimension. He got pulled in, and since he didn't enter the dimension willingly, he wasn't sure which spot to exit from to return home. He had no idea how long he was trapped and went nearly mad. His only way out was to forcefully focus all of his mental energy on a memory of his long estranged son, Wyatt, to act as a beacon home. Unbeknownst to us, apparently Ohnn had had a wife and son before his original accident. After returning home, he immediately learns that his son was shot by a Russian gangster in a failed drive-by attempt. The Spot found out that it was Dmitry's orders and embarked on a brutal quest of revenge before standing down under the promise that Spider-Man would bring the mobster to justice. Spider-Man brought him in, and he did go to jail. However, after being imprisoned, Ivan was eventually driven mad by the prospect that the Spot could be anywhere at any time, planning to kill him. Now, one last quick story about the Spot. Remember when I mentioned that the Spot was immortal, essentially? During the 2022 run of Carnage, we see the symbiote tracking down supervillains, attempting to absorb them to make himself stronger by gaining their powers. Carnage tracks down the Spot in his lab and is able to get the drop on him. While the Spot is far too fast for Carnage to beat alone, he's held down by Carnage's sidekick, a sniveling wannabe serial killer named Kenneth Neely. The momentary distraction is all Carnage needs to completely shred the Spot. However, one thing the Spot's disembodied head says here is pretty interesting. He says that Carnage can't defeat him for good, as the Spot controls the spotted dimension. Spot's head then disappears, traveling into the spotted dimension, presumably to recuperate and return. This kind of explains how it's possible that he keeps coming back to life. As long as he ends up in the spotted dimension somehow, he seemingly regenerates. Or writers just kind of forget that he died and keep using him because he's such an A-list boss character. So there you have it. The Spot is Spider-Man's most powerful enemy who can't die, and if you disagree, you're a casual fan, and I will not be listening to your opinion. Thank you very much. That is about everything I wanted to cover on the Spot today. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a lot, and if you did, consider liking and subscribing and doing all that other junk YouTubers ask you to do. This has been Nick with Key Issues, thanking you for watching, and remember the motto, the Spot over everything.